Welcome to episode 20 of the Exit Philosophy podcast on Monday, September the 18th, 2023. I'm Scott MacArthur, Scotty Mac. He is Richard Griffin. You can call him Griff. And we don't know what to make of the last week of Blue Jays baseball, but it's kind of where we were last week is where we are now, with a lot that happened in between. The Jays are in a playoff spot. They're in the second wild card. They just swept Boston, coming off being swept in a 4-game series at home by the Texas Rangers. Then Texas went to Cleveland and got swept while the Jays were sweeping Boston. The fans turned on the Jays in the stadium. Now I think we're in love with them again. We don't know how to feel. We don't know how to feel. And we'll get to all of that, Griff. I'm just happy to be here with you today.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just happy to be here.
Through a week of hurricane while the Jays were on their week of roller coaster. What was Hurricane Lee like there?
Hurricane Lee was a thing. So I'm on the Bedford Basin in Halifax, and we didn't get directly hit. So the people who went through Hurricane Fiona last year will tell you that it was far worse in our area. Dorian was here 3 years ago. Juan was here maybe 4 years ago for Dorian. Juan was here about 20 years ago, and that was so bad the name was retired. So this one from a Halifax regional municipality, HRM, as we call it, standpoint, wasn't that bad, but it was much harsher in Yarmouth to the west, Shelburne County, up through Digby, and then it blew through Fundy and hit the southern shore of New Brunswick. So the thing that struck me, Griff, was just how long it lasted. I woke up Saturday morning and it had started and the power had gone out here. We got power back pretty quickly. Then it went out one more time. Then we got it back and it never went out again where I am. But I have a cousin who's going to school at Dalhousie, and he was without power for more than 24 hours. And he lives like 15 minutes away, more into the city of Halifax than I'm in. So it was kind of hit and miss. The wind was something. It rained sideways. For my first career hurricane, I feel like I got lucky. I tried to post some videos, show people what was going on my Instagram, Facebook. But I can see how vicious these things can be if you're on the wrong side of the storm or if you get the center of the storm coming over you. And I know that I'm talking to somebody who grew up a bit of an expert in this field. I never pieced two and two together.
I was going to say, Scotty, you're a bit soft. I grew up in Jamaica until I was 10 years old, 9 years old. And my older brother, Pat, was born in the middle of a huge hurricane in Jamaica that the hospital didn't have power. My mom was, she gave birth in the dark, which is, I don't know, I guess that's fine. I've never had that happen to me, but
you've never given birth in the dark? You've only given birth in the light?
There were hurricanes every year washing through Jamaica. Poor Captain Morgan had an earthquake and a hurricane that destroyed his pirate headquarters back in whatever year it was. And that's still a landmark in Jamaica. But yeah, that's hurricanes. I haven't been in one in a while, but yeah, we grew up with 2 or 3 major ones hitting every year. So yeah, good luck with Hurricane Lee and whatever. It was tropical storm by the time it got to you, wasn't it?
Yeah, or like a post-tropical cyclone or something. The thing is, and I don't want to minimize this because there are people who suffered damage and we're not making light, but the one advantage, if I can put it that way, that we have is that obviously the waters of the North Atlantic Ocean cool as these storms come toward us. And I can vouch for that, having swam at a couple of beaches here. I mean, it's August and the water is still chilly. That helps. Jamaica down in the Caribbean Sea, man, like you're getting category 3s and 4s, right? That water is steamy hot in the summer. So it doesn't slow down.
Yeah, we'll go from that, and we'll get into the Blue Jays week. I mean, that was stormy.
Well, which was a bit of a hurricane.
It was stormy, yeah.
A lot of sucking and blowing going on.
There were
at the same time.
I mean, that stadium hasn't heard that much booing since Anthony Bass emerged from the bullpen that one time. And it was, you know, like we've talked about on Exit Philosophy about scoreboard watching being a mug's game at this time, especially with this team and with the way the race is going, and that it's better to set a target win total and then ignore the scoreboard. And never has that philosophy been more relevant than what we've been watching for the last week. I mean, sitting where you are, what did it look like to you, Scotty?
Well, I mean, I just can't believe, Griff, that the Jays are a game and a half up on a playoff spot right now. They're a game and a half up on the Mariners, who are the best team in the American League that is on the outside of the playoff picture as we sit here on Monday, September the 18th, given everything that happened. And I feel like this is some kind of weird 4x100 race where all the participants are like, here, you have the baton being a playoff spot. We'll hand it off to you. We don't really want it. I'm having trouble defining this as a playoff race. This feels more like a group of teams that are stumbling to the finish line here, and two of them are going to get in. Like I think Houston's in pretty good shape now, and then two of the three that are the Blue Jays, Rangers, and Mariners are going to make it, and the Jays have the advantage in that the Rangers and Mariners will be playing each other. So as long as the Jays win their games, by the way, that whole like Texas playing Seattle thing is not an advantage if the Jays aren't winning the games they're playing.
Right, which is why I pointed out that setting a win total means that you have to play well. You can't just look at the scoreboard and hope teams lose. You have to also do your part and win games, which is why setting a bar seems to make more sense.
So you've been saying 91 wins, right?
I've been saying 91 wins, even with losing the tiebreaker, which means that if the Jays won 91 games and Texas or the Mariners won 91 games, the Jays would be out. The Jays would not qualify. I've looked up magic numbers, and magic numbers are can be interpreted very many ways, but the Rays and the Orioles have magic numbers respectively of 3 and 2 with the Blue Jays. So don't even worry about the division, which I once said that the Jays had a chance at the division. Don't even worry about the division. And the first wild card is going to be that other team. So that leaves the second and third wild card among 4 teams. And as we've pointed out, one of the 3 AL West teams has to win that division. So the Blue Jays have 12 games left as we speak on Monday with an off day. Their magic number against Texas is 13, even in taking into consideration that they lose the tiebreak, that the tiebreak belongs to Texas. It's 13. So the Blue Jays' fate against the Rangers is not in their own hands because they've only got 12 games left. So 13, it's 13 against the Astros, and it's 12 against the Mariners. So when we look ahead and see that Texas and the Mariners play 7 times, that works well into the scenario of counting down the Blue Jays' magic number, because somebody's going to lose those games and cut into that magic numbers that I just outlined. So when you look at it, and the Jays comfortably in that second wild card spot right now, comfortably meaning within whatever number of games, their chances are looking pretty good. But as you said, as long as they do their part and take care of business, especially against the Yankees. 6 games against the Yankees, 6 games against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is not going to be playing out the string in any way because they're battling the Orioles for first place in the division and for a bye. Very important for the Rays. However, if the Jays take care of the Rays in that first half of the 6 games that they play in the final weekend, then becomes the Rays comfortably in the wild card spot, then again, the Jays would have an advantage in that they're playing for something likely, and the Rays are just setting themselves up for the postseason in terms of rotation and resting some players. So the Jays series against the Rays takes on an added meaning of doing well in that series, because then it could affect the final weekend against the Rays. So there's so many permutations and combinations of ways that the Jays could make it or could be eliminated, that it's a mug's game to even think about it right now, other than setting that bar at 91 and seeing them try and reach out and attain that.
And there's a lot of I told you so going on. You know, this team goes on a losing skid and looks as bad as it did against Texas, and that brings out the I told you so's on that side. And then they sweep Boston, and they're back into a playoff spot because Texas gets swept in Cleveland, and the Dodgers sweep the Mariners in Seattle. And it's, well, see, I told you so. I mean, a lot can change in 72 hours over the course of a weekend. But Griff, I'm telling you right now, the general manager of this baseball team, Ross Atkins, he needs this team to make the playoffs, because the fan base saw what it saw on Wednesday in the 10-0 loss, Thursday in the 9-2 loss. You and I sat here last Monday before the start of the 4-game series, and I clearly remember you saying a split will do. Winning the series would be great because, you know, in a 4-game series, you split, you break even. You win 3 out of 4, you gain 2 games on your opponent in the standings. You lose 3 out of 4, you lose 2 games. Obviously, a sweep of a 4-game series means that you gain 4 games, or if you get swept, you lose 4 games, as was the case with the Blue Jays. There are big swings, potentially, in a 4-game series. And to look as impotent, if I could use a word begging for like a Viagra or Cialis sponsorship of this program, but to look as impotent as this team did in rolling over on Wednesday and Thursday, having lost the first 2 games of this series, the vitriol in that stadium, and I'm watching on TV, Griff, I'm 1,300 kilometers away here in beautiful Halifax, Nova Scotia. I could feel that. And so I'm asking myself, who are people booing? Who are they booing? Are they booing Vlad? Are they booing Bo? They can't possibly be booing this starting rotation because, goodness, it's been so good, so healthy, so consistent for most of the year. What is it about this team that people don't like? And I will come back to the front office, and my feeling, and I guess I have to shut my mouth because they swept Boston, although don't just assume they're back on track now because they swept Boston. They had one moment, Vladdy hitting the home run. You and I have talked about the need for Vladdy to create moments. He did that on Friday with the 3-run bomb, and Jose Barrios was an absolute stud and a hero. They got lucky on Saturday. Luck is a part of it, so I'm not going to take it away from them. I'm not going to debit them that. But Dalton Varsho should have lined out to end that ball game, and the center fielder misplayed it, went to extras. Nobody could score, even with a runner on second. Jays win. Yesterday, they play another close game and win. It all counts. Doesn't have to be pretty. They won those games. But I'm telling you, there is a disdain here for something. I believe it's the front office, but 42,000 people inside a stadium can have individually different reasons for reacting how they do.
Yeah, I mean, I heard the booing. I acknowledged to myself that it was deserved. They were swept at home in a series that they needed to win, or that the fans felt was essential to making the postseason. And in the final inning of the final game, trailing by multiple runs, you saw hitters go in there and take hellacious hacks looking for home runs instead of grinding. There was no grinding. And I think that that's the aspect of this team at certain points that the fans don't like to see. They don't like to see a guy go up 7 runs down and just be swinging for the fences. And Vlad was one of those guys in that situation. And God bless Vlad, because we talked about it, that he needs to be the leader and Bo needs to be a leader, and they need to be hitting back-to-back 2-3 in the order. And it is part of their swagger and it is part of the intimidation. But if neither man is producing, then it matters little. But Vlad was starting to produce. Vlad made some great plays defensively. So overall, he's showing the leadership that is needed down the stretch, and it needs to continue. They need to not look at the scoreboard, but take care of business. That second game of the Red Sox series, the 13-inning game, was a disgrace in terms of the Blue Jays playing fundamental baseball. They made base running gaff after base running gaff. They made they didn't come up big in certain situations, but Jordan Romano showed that he can be a closer down the stretch. He pitched two great innings, starting with a ghost runner on second base. He showed that he can be that guy. Vlad showed that he can be that guy to lead the offense, to lead the team. You got Babe Schneider, and I hate that name, Babe. He's 0 for 17, and he's batting cleanup in this lineup. He's 0 for 17.
But what does that tell you about the lineup, Griff?
Hit the ball hard. If you project his numbers, he's 248 since that first series at Fenway Park. He's hitting 248 since that first series at Fenway. He does give you good at bats. He works the strike zone. He doesn't swing at bad pitches. He's got a lot of extra base hits during that time, but he's not a cleanup hitter, and he might not be an everyday player because his defense is a little bit lacking at second base, in left field. He could be a DH now that Brandon Belt is out, but he started at second base and batted cleanup against the Red Sox, and they swept a series. So there are so many reasons for fans not to believe in this team, but they're taking advantage of other fan bases and other teams that are contenders who are taking a step backwards. To me, think about it, Scotty, the fact that there are 3 wild cards available, and I never used to be a huge more than one wild card guy, but think of all the fan bases that are connected to this pennant race in September. Think of the number of teams that are still involved, whereas if it was division winners, you wouldn't have nearly the interest in Major League Baseball down the stretch as you've got now. So, congratulations to the concept of 3 wild cards. It's keeping the Blue Jays fan base alive. And just to follow up and close this part of the discussion about the Jays need to qualify for the wild card for the fan base. Think about the offseason if they don't qualify and they're building this new mega structure underneath the stands behind home plate, and they're trying to sell luxury priced tickets, season tickets, packages, and they're a team that didn't qualify for the postseason. If they qualify, and even if they lose in a wild card, say they win the wild card series and move on to the next round, then you've got something to sell to your fan base. But otherwise, if they don't make it, it'll be a tough sell, especially when you're pushing a lot of your longtime season ticket holders aside and telling them that the cost of their loyalty is going to quadruple.
Yeah, that's why I think the general manager's under a little bit of fire here, Griff, because the chairman is completely unpredictable. Both from an emotional point of view and an intelligence point of view. I think the president is safe, Mark Shapiro, And I don't think Mark Shapiro is going to fire Ross Atkins unless he's told by somebody above him to do it. But I think that that is a possibility if this team misses the playoffs. And who did I think of first when the Red Sox shit-canned Chaim Bloom? After 4 seasons, the first of which was the COVID year in 2020, he very early on in his tenure traded Mookie Betts, which, I mean, I want to believe he would not have done if it was up to him. And what I mean by it being up to him is if it was his wallet and he had the money, he probably would have paid Mookie Betts, one of the best players in the game, a guy who was a crucial part of their 2018 World Championship team. But they're crapping on Bloom now because he didn't get the return. Now, I will bet my mortgage that Alex Verdugo is somewhere else next year because they're crapping on the return for Mookie Betts, of which Verdugo was a part. Verdugo, was persona non grata for a game for the Red Sox a while back, I think against the Blue Jays at Fenway, and he didn't care if he got traded at the deadline, as was rumored, although it didn't happen. Like, I'm looking at Chaim Bloom. He didn't last 4 years. And I suppose part of that is not making the playoffs in 3 of those 4 years in an era where 6 of 15 do, although in reality, it's 4 playoff spots that you're competing for, your own division or one of the 3 wild card spots. So I look at it and I go, well, Ross Atkins and Brian Cashman, the Yankees are suddenly a mess. He's been there a quarter century, and the general manager here has had double the time of Chaim Bloom. And I know they won playoff games in 2016 in their first year here, but it wasn't really their team. The litmus test for this front office is what this group that they have built accomplishes. And so far, they have taken advantage of the fact that there's an expanded playoff format. Thumbs up to that. Everybody's on equal footing in that regard. Now they got to take that next step and actually show success in the playoffs. And I just haven't seen 5.5 months of baseball that suggests it's going to happen. And I keep telling myself it's the starting rotation that makes it possible.
I got 3 points to make here, Scotty. The first one is that Ross Atkins and his team are 3-0 against teams with no general manager. So that's a good sign. And unfortunately, they don't have any of those series left on the schedule. So, perfect record over the last little bit. The second point is that John Henry and the Red Sox, their last 4 general managers, I believe it's 4, it might be 3, I think it's 4, have all been fired or let go within 100 days tenure of each other. So he's got a statute of their limitations, and he got rid of Dave Dombrowski at approximately the same point in the schedule and point in the calendar year. And Dave Dombrowski has proved over time that he is a GM that can lead you to the postseason. So they've done that. The third point is that when a move like Chaim Bloom being fired happens, don't listen to the immediate media response, because just like Alek Manoah, the message is being controlled from within the organization. So until Alek Manoah has a chance to represent himself and to talk about his issues, don't believe what is out there in the media. And the same thing with Chaim Bloom and his failures. Don't believe what's out there in the Red Sox, New England media, because that message is being delivered from within.
Right.
That's all I got.
And a reminder that the Boston Globe, no disrespect to the reporters and columnists who work for that paper, everybody's got to make a living, but the Boston Globe is similar to Sportsnet in that the people who own the baseball team own the newspaper there. People who own the baseball team here own the TV network and one of the radio stations that is heavily involved in promoting and broadcasting the product. That's just it's a matter of fact. It's not a judgment. The Manoah thing I would like to discuss, Rich, because I put it out on X. I'm still used to saying Twitter. I don't know if anybody saw it though, because I don't think tweets get amplified if you didn't buy that little blue check mark.
Yeah, that's what we're finding out, and it's not good.
And as I don't have a predilection for fascism, I haven't bought a blue check mark and don't engage with a lot of the bots that apparently have these blue check marks. But I won't digress further on that. My feeling was the Manoah, and I'm going to air quote it here. If you're watching on YouTube, you're seeing it while also admiring my plant that's over my left shoulder. It's thriving. Didn't stick it out in the hurricane. The news about Alek Manoah pulling the chute, or however you want to describe it, came out in the middle of that Texas series. And my first thought was, okay, here we go. Here we go. Shiny object over there that's reflecting the sun right into our eyes, something to distract us. Here's a player we can blame for why it's all gone sideways. And I do believe, without blaming either of them, I do believe Vladdy underperforming offensively and Alek Manoah regressing so badly contributes to this team not being as safely and clearly into a playoff spot as we thought they would be at this time of year with a couple of weeks left in the season. But that's an aside. I just thought the timing of it was ugly and cowardly, quite frankly, because that narrative about Alek Manoah definitely came from within the organization. And we know, you can talk to John Gibbons about this, 2018. They floated a trial balloon. They had already agreed with John Gibbons. They had sat down and talked about it. Gibby knew he wasn't coming back. They knew Gibby wasn't coming back. And they still went out and floated a goddamn trial balloon. And then the fans turned on them because everybody loves Gibby. The fans turned on them saying, why are you firing him now? Let him finish the season. This feels like a trial balloon, or more to the point, in the middle of that shitty Texas series where the team took on the culture of its front office, they were trying to float a distraction. Well, here, let's talk about Alek Manoah now and how he's bailed on the team. I thought it would, even if it's all true, Griff, which I don't believe, but even if it's all true, it's hideous and it's cheap and it's cowardly and it's typical.
So Alek Manoah's disappearance is the equivalent of Hunter Biden's laptop. Hey, look at this.
Hey, look at this. Everybody's bad. So the bad stuff we do is equal to the bad stuff everybody else does anyway, right?
Yeah. I've been getting a lot of X messages. Well, not messages from X's, but concerning.
You got a lot of X's on Twitter? What?
Concerning the 2015 team and who would win a series, blah, 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 between 23 and 2015. So I thought it would be a good exercise for us to compare those two rosters, those two teams. 2015 was the first time of a whole generation of Blue Jays fans that the team was going to the postseason. And I think it's interesting just to go down the roster, compare position by position, rotation, bullpen, and have a back and forth here about what you think was coming prepared. The man is coming prepared. He just, in case you're on audio only, held up his list of comparisons that he's already looked into. So
shout out to the paper provided by Travelers Insurance, where my brother Drew and sister-in-law Lauren work.
And there's an umbrella just in case there's another hurricane comes by.
Yeah, I'll be like the penguin from Batman. Just hold it up and fly away.
Okay, since you are the radio guy and I'm just me, why don't you conduct this discussion? And since you've already got the same list that I got, let's go. Let's figure it out.
All right, let's do this. So why don't we start along the infield? And we'll start at first base. The 2023 first baseman for the Blue Jays, is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. The 2015 first base combo that we'll go with, but the first name is who we'll focus on more than the second, if you remember 2015. Don't remember the Justin Smoke from 16 onward. Remember that he lost playing time to Chris Colabello. So Chris Colabello / Justin Smoke is your first base combination, but it was Colabello who was playing by the end of the year and into the playoffs. So would you rather have Vlad or would you rather have Chris Colabello?
Colabello, and he ended up playing 101 games that year, and his issues with Major League Baseball didn't happen until 2016. But in 2015, he was the playoff first baseman. He played all 6 games against Kansas City at first base. Smoke was a switch hitting bench player, but he played more games at first than anybody that season. But obviously, you got to go with Vlad as the advantage there. And to me, it's a huge advantage, given that they haven't reached the postseason yet. But in terms of who you would rather have, clearly, it's got to be Vlad.
Yeah, I mean, I like how you laid it out with some numbers and different things. This is the quickest check mark. Actually, there are 2 really quick check marks for me on this list. This is one of them. It's Vladimir Guerrero Jr. No questions asked. Set aside the disappointment at periods of time this season. He is an absolute difference maker. And we, as people who want the Blue Jays to do well, we need him to be a difference maker down the stretch. And if they make it into the playoffs, we need him hitting home runs in October, Griff. He's got to come up with some big swats like he did on Friday against Boston.
Scotty, can we just agree to one thing, that even though this is the Jays, that when you say check mark to Vlad, that it's not a blue check mark? Because we're down on blue check marks.
We're down on blue check marks. I sometimes see yellow check marks on X2. I don't even know what those are.
Okay, we're down on yellow check marks too.
Are we? Okay, I don't know what they are.
I don't even know what it is, but
I don't know if I should have an opinion on that or not.
Right. Next,
second base. So you can give me your sense of what second base is for the 2023 Blue Jays. I've written down Whit Merrifield as the second baseman. Davis Schneider can be a factor here. Kevin Biggio can be a factor here. Santiago Espinal can be a factor here. But Whit is the guy that I'm honing in on. Ryan Goins is the second baseman in 2015. And I'm thinking to myself, well, Ryan Goins at that time was a terrific defensive second baseman for the Blue Jays, natural shortstop who'd moved over. But I think there is more potential here in totality, factoring in offense, of course, for this year's second baseman, who I'm naming Whit Merrifield, but could be Davis Schneider, whatever. I would go with, on an individual basis, this year's second baseman.
I would have to say that Whit Merrifield should be the guy listed, because other than if a left-handed pitcher is in and they're going to sit either Kiermaier or Varsho, and Merrifield will go to the left, I think when it comes to crunch time in a postseason, that Merrifield will be playing every day, and he should be playing second base most of the time. And in terms of Ryan Goins, I mean, Ryan Goins, like we pointed out on Exit Philosophy, he had the 5th largest ovation on Jose Bautista Level of Excellence Day, which is stunning. I mean, it's not surprising. He also had a standing ovation his first game he returned in another uniform to Rogers Center. But popularity does not rule the day in this situation. I would have to go with Whit Merrifield on a slim margin of victory, but yeah, he's overall a better player, better 2-strike hitter. Yeah, so that's Vlad and Whit Merrifield from the 23 team. Let's go. What's next?
Let's go to short. So, and just rule or however you want to describe it, I'm talking about the player as he is now or was then. I'm not talking about reputation that preceded him or anything. So it's really how's the position player today performing? How was the position player performing at the time in 2015, as opposed to anything that led up to it? Shortstop, 2023 Bo Bichette, 2015 Troy Tulowitzki. And again, not concerned about what preceded Troy Tulowitzki or what even precedes Bo Bichette. I'm going with Bo Bichette. I think he's been this team's best player this year, most consistent player. He is a leader on this team. There is a desire that I have to see him be maybe something he's not and be willing to take some more pitches outside of the strike zone and not go up hacking all the time. But Bo is who Bo is, and he's extremely important to this group. I know Tulowitzki changed the fortunes of the team when he was acquired in 15 because Reyes couldn't play shortstop anymore. He'd slowed down. He'd rolled his ankle in 13 and was never the same. And the acquisition of Tulowitzki really did matter. But I think as a totality of a baseball player, Bo Bichette is my pick 2023 over Troy Tulowitzki 2015.
Troy Tulowitzki, when he was acquired, provided the impetus for the fan enthusiasm. It was a holy shit moment when Tulowitzki was acquired because nobody believed that that would happen. And Alex Anthopoulos went out and began his sort of trade deadline rebuild with Troy Tulowitzki. Tulowitzki was a veteran shortstop, really savvy ball player. I remember asking him one time, there was a pop-up to third base, a routine pop-up to third base. It was a day game. The sun was shining. And next thing you know, Tulowitzki's standing in the coach's box next to the third baseman in case he didn't see the ball or in case it bounced away. And I asked him about it after the game, and he smiled and he said, "Oh, you noticed." And that's the sort of play that you're not going to see from Bo because Bo's a younger player. Inexperienced and maybe not as savvy in terms of playing shortstop, but I got to take Bo over Tulo. Tulo hit a big home run in the Texas series, was a key moment in moving on to the next round, but still Bo's the man, and he has room obviously to step up the rest of this season. If he does, and Vlad can continue, and we've talked about it on Exit Philosophy. This is number 20. We probably talk about it every week in terms of Bo needing to be one of those guys. But Bo has the capability of being one of those guys, and so I got to take him over Tulo. That's 3-0 for the 23 team.
Right, and I do believe that Bo's collarbones could better absorb Kevin Pillar's chin crashing into them. That was the weirdest injury ever. You know, Tulo going back on that short fly ball, Pillar charging in, and Pillar's chin running into Tulo's upper back, and Tulo was gone for 2 weeks. But kind of fed into the Tulo can't stay.
Is that weirder than the wild card collision where Gurney was called out on the field after Bo went back for that bloop?
Good point.
Probably about the same, but it shows Bo's durability.
Bo's durability. Yeah, exactly. This is another one that's obvious to me, Griff, and it's going to be my first selection for the old team, 2015, third base. It's Matt Chapman now, Josh Donaldson then. I will be an old man, and the worms will be chewing at my brain, and I will be losing memory. And I will still regale anybody who is willing to listen of stories of watching Josh Donaldson play baseball every single day in 2015, of covering Josh Donaldson and his intensity and just not knowing what you were going to get when you walked up to his locker stall. But man, when he wanted to engage you, he was awesome. Truly one of my favorite parts of covering this team was watching Josh Donaldson play at the level he did for the entirety of that 2015 season. And so Josh Donaldson's my guy, no questions asked.
Well, there are a lot of similarities between the two third basemen, including the fact that if you let them walk through your house, every mirror would be fogged up by the time they got through. Both very intense players, both Oakland A's major league prospects, or, who made their debuts there. Both wanted to play every day, both played excellent defense. But to me, Josh Donaldson in 2015 and in his time with the Blue Jays was the man. I mean, he was the man. He was the leader. The only time I got mad at him was when he was calling play-by-play on my scrap with Marcus Stroman in the clubhouse, and he was amusing everyone by giving it whoever the greatest boxing announcer was, maybe Howard Cosell. But he called the play-by-play, and I found out after, and I was a little mad at him, but you can't be mad at his performance on the field. The big moment for me in his MVP year was going to Anaheim and going head-to-head with Mike Trout, and in 4 games just demolishing him stats-wise as the Jays forged their way to the postseason. So, yeah, that's one for the old guys. 2015, Josh Donaldson over Matt Chapman, and so now it's 3-1 for 2023.
Yeah, we're in total agreement on this, Griff. I'm still waiting for us to disagree on something.
Well, we're both keen observateurs of the game.
Yeah, and thank you for teaching me a new offshoot of the word observe. I don't know if I'd ever heard that one before. I'll trust that it's an actual word. I like that. Observateur.
Serge Touchette used to use that on the beat because his English was sort of hit and miss, and that was one of his favorite words in terms of what he was seeing. So yeah, I'm sure if it's a word, but it's a Serge Touchette word.
I feel like we should be wearing top hats and smoking corncob pipes or something, and just looking very refined. Catcher. So I'm going to duo this up because I think the position is one that, I mean, come playoff time, you've got a guy who plays every day typically, but over the course of a long season, you need at least 2. So in 2023, you've got Danny Jansen and Alejandro Kirk. In 2015, it was the Russell Martin show, and you remember that Dioner Navarro was there, and he had started in 2014, but was the backup to Russell Martin in 2015 because Martin had signed his free agent contract prior to that season. This is a strictly Russell Martin vote. It is not meant as any disrespect to Danny Jansen, who I think is a heart and soul player. And Danny's not a perfect player, but Danny Jansen is crucial to the vibe and to how the 2023 Toronto Blue Jays roll. But I am a Russell Martin guy for this one. So because of Russell Martin, I'm going to pick 2015, the catching position. I think I prefer this duo of Jansen-Kirk to the duo of Martin-Navarro, but Russell Martin does it for me. So by a slight margin, I give Russell Martin and the 2015 Blue Jays the edge at that position.
Well, by the time you get to postseason, it's not as important who the backup, who the second catcher is. But, in terms of season long overall, it might be Jansen and Kirk. But with Jansen on the sideline and Kirk not a guy that you could probably put an everyday load on in the postseason. Plus, Russell Martin. Just look at the signing of Russell Martin in time for the 2015 season. In his previous 6 seasons, he had taken to the Dodgers to the postseason 2 years in a row. Then he went to New York and took the Yankees to the postseason 2 years in a row. Then he went to Pittsburgh. I mean, you can say Dodgers and Yankees, that's fine. They might go to the postseason anyway. Pittsburgh hadn't even played 500 for years. And he goes to Pittsburgh and takes them to the postseason 2 years in a row. And then he comes to Toronto and he takes them to the postseason 2 years in a row. So in terms of intangibles, you got to go with 2015 and you got to go with Russell Martin. I think Russell Martin's preparedness in terms of familiarizing himself with his new pitchers, his new pitching staff. One time he wouldn't go to the World Baseball Classic for Team Canada because he wanted to learn his new pitchers at spring training. And, that's a professional attitude. That's not a Patriots attitude, but it's a professional attitude. And there's no doubt in my mind that, even though Danny Jansen's a wonderful human being and a really good catcher and is having his best offensive year, I would take, in terms of going deep into October, you got to go with Russell Martin.
And just because I think it's an interesting conversation, if Danny Jansen was healthy, and we'll see what happens if they make the playoffs. He's out for the rest of the regular season. But if Danny Jansen was healthy, he's a starting catcher. There's no conversation about that, Griff, in my opinion, for this 2023 team.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
No conversation.
Not even worth continuing that discussion. But that leaves 3-2 for the current 23 team. What do we got? The designated hitter, I think, is going to pull 2015 even. Edwin Encarnacion? Yeah.
Or Brandon Belt, 2023.
Yeah. Brandon Belt, who knows if he'll be back, was on pace for 200 plus strikeouts. He controls the strike zone, but if you have a platoon that includes Davis Schneider, at least you've got that same approach in the strike zone, not going and swinging at sliders outside. But whoever the combination is without Brandon Belt, and even with Brandon Belt, if he came back, you'd have to go Edwin 100%. And that's a wide margin.
All right. So it's 3-3. And now we've got three categories left. We got the outfield in general. We got the starting pitchers. We got the relievers. Two of these three are difficult for me. There's one that I guess you could argue should or would be difficult. I didn't find it difficult, but this is one of the two that is difficult, and it's the outfield, because as a whole, I like the Kiermaier, Springer, Varsho possibilities. I like the defense. But on the flip side, I appreciate Kevin Pillar's defense in 2015 in center field. Not as good as Kiermaier. And Jose Bautista is the best of this entire group. So with Ben Revere, Dalton Pompey, and Ezekiel Carrera rounding out the 2015 outfield, and the 23 outfield being Kiermaier, Springer, Varsho, Whit Merrifield sometimes, but we have him at second base. I look at this, Griff, and it's hard for me to make a decision, but if you're going to ask me to pick against a group that has Jose Bautista in it, you're really going to have to convince me that it's worth it to do that. And maybe you want to try. But based on Jose Bautista being in the 2015 group and Kevin Pillar's defense, while not as good in center field as Kevin Kiermaier's, still being pretty good, I'm going to lean in like a 51-49 final score for the 2015 outfield.
I think that, the comparisons of Kevin Pillar and Kevin Kiermaier, they always had, every time that the Jays played the Rays, the comparison was made because they were both late round draft picks, undervalued as amateurs and chips on their shoulder coming up. And then Jays fans always wondered why Kevin Pillar never won a Gold Glove, and Kevin Kiermaier won every year. Now they're seeing it. Now they're seeing the difference. They're seeing a guy who gets great jumps in Kiermaier, a guy who's fearless in the outfield with the wall, a guy who understands positioning, has a better throwing arm, and you can see the difference. And Kevin Pillar, I love Kevin. He's a great addition to any clubhouse, and he's finding his role in Atlanta as a fourth outfielder. But I got to go with the 2015 outfield also because of the Jose Bautista leadership factor. And I think the 2023 outfield may get better if Varsho finds himself in future years, maybe next year or the year after. Kiermaier doesn't look, to me, it doesn't look like Kiermaier wants to go anywhere else other than be 120 game outfielder for the Blue Jays moving forward. I mean, he sang the national anthem when he got obtained, when he signed with the Jays. He had his kids roaming around with Blue Jays swag on, and that was the video that went out. It looks to me, and he grabbed the microphone just before the Texas sweep, which wasn't a good thing. And he said, "Are you with us?" Just like Will Ferrell in Old School streaking the quad. But nobody followed him through the Texas series. Now everybody's back on board after the sweep of the Red Sox. But I still got to go with the 2015 just because of the presence of Jose Bautista and what he meant to that team.
By the way, and this probably an off-season conversation more than a today conversation, but would Kevin Kiermaier come back as a fourth outfielder who would be a defensive replacement in games where you have the lead late, and who would get his fair share of starts maybe a couple of times a week, or if George Springer goes down with an injury or somebody goes down? My argument being, you move Varsho to center field next year, Griff, and you need more pop out of that outfield in general. So you got to address that in left. You got to get a corner outfielder who can hit.
Well,
if Kiermaier wants to be here, I think his role has to change, is my point.
When Kiermaier signed originally, that was what the media and the fans believed would be his role this year. And then he went on his conference call and he said, no, I've been told I'm the everyday center fielder, which it's turned out he has been. But still, against left-handers, either Varsho or Kiermaier has been sitting lately. The other one plays center field, and Whit Merrifield goes to left. So there's been a pattern, and it's been a role, it's partially been the role that you described in terms of being a defensive replacement. You see most wins that the Jays have, and it'll end up with Varsho in left and Kiermaier in center. And I think that it's not a stretch to believe that he would take that role for 2024, because it's not far from where he is right now. And he's just getting more run as a starting center fielder than people thought. But, maybe by next year he'd be ready to do that. He'd also have to go out on the market and see if there's any other team that would be willing to offer him more than that. And I don't think there is.
So we've got, and again, we're in agreement. This is an exciting segment. We just agree on everything. So it's 4-3 for 2015. I like that there are 9 categories here because it means we're going to have a winner. The starting rotation. And we'll have to see how it plays out. Should the Blue Jays make the playoffs and get through the best of 3 wild card, which they will play on the road in either Baltimore, Tampa Bay, or Minnesota if they make the playoffs. But the 23 rotation, Gausman, Barrios, Bassett, Kikuchi, Ryu. And we've talked about how we think Ryu would be the 4th starter in a series and Kikuchi would move to the bullpen. The 15 rotation, Marco Estrada, David Price, Marcus Stroman, and R.A. Dickey. Remember that Mark Burley was not active on the playoff roster for any of the series that year. So I'm going with those 4. Estrada leaves.
But if you're going to include Kikuchi, who we're suspecting would be in the bullpen for the postseason, then I think we should include Burley in the discussion because
Okay.
I mean, he was an important part of the regular season, and therefore, we can't look ahead and say we're going to include Kikuchi in the rotation without including Burley.
Okay, so add Burley then if you want to do that. And Estrada leaves us with great memories. The David Price acquisition was another wow moment, and man, did he deliver. Don't let any other narrative suggest otherwise he can't win in the playoffs and all that crap. He was brilliant against the Royals, and that miscommunication between Goins and Bautista and the rain and all that in Game 6. That's as good a game as you'll see pitched up until that point. I think the Royals had one base runner up until the 6th or 7th inning when all of that went down. The Jays had that, I think it was a 3-0 lead, and then sadly coughed it up. But again, I come back to the totality. Gausman and Barrios have been excellent this year. Kikuchi has pitched above expectation for the entirety of the season. Chris Bassett, to me, is as competent and functional a mid-rotation piece as you can have. You don't want him as your ace, and he's much better than your 5. And Hyunjin Ryu has come back and has kind of burleyed for us, right? With no velocity, but just I love watching Hyunjin Ryu pitch when he's in his groove, for the same reasons I enjoyed watching Burley and Marco Estrada, because they don't beat you with heat. They'll throw off speed. They got changeups that can neutralize hitters. He's just a fun guy to watch pitch when he's on. I will take the 2023 starting rotation over the 2015 rotation, Griff, from my perspective, to tie this up at 4-4, pending the relievers category.
Yeah, I can see. I mean, we all remember Marco Estrada's contributions during the postseason, unexpected in a way after what he had shown in his career, and basically working with 2 pitches. But I can see a comp between him and I could see Barrios being that guy in the postseason for the 23 Blue Jays, somebody who's talented, who has had a track record, but not in the spotlight that he would be in that situation. I think his last 3 or 4 outings and the confidence level that has returned to Barrios is something to behold, is something really great. But you look at the other guy, Dickey in 2015, Price was, as you said, Price was like the pitching Tulowitzki in terms of galvanizing the fan base. And I remember watching Price go out to the bullpen before a game. I went up specifically to be in the crowd to see the reaction. And it was like, I don't know, it was like Jesus riding a donkey into Jerusalem. It was like I'm relying on my Catholic school upbringing, but it was that sort of elation.
Did that actually happen?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
You mean in terms of the story that was told?
Did he ride a donkey into Jerusalem?
Yeah, on Palm Sunday. Yeah, that's how Palm Sunday came.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so glad to teach you a lesson.
Thank you.
Yeah. But in terms of Price's impact, that was it. And as you said, he got a bum rap in the postseason. I remember the World Series when he was a rookie with the Rays, how important he was coming out of the bullpen as a number 1 overall draft pick, and how successful he was in that role. So, come on, people. But I would say that because of the reliability, the ability of this rotation to take the ball every 5 days, and that you can end a streak or begin a streak with anyone in that rotation, that I'd have to go with the 23 rotation over the 15. But, it's more of the marathon rotation than a sprint rotation. But I'll still go 23. So once again, we agree. which is probably
I
why we're doing the podcast.
Gosman to me is a guy who has that ability to shove for 8 innings, Griff. I know sometimes he gets bogged down and his pitch count is into the 90s and early 100s by the 5th inning, and you're like, man, how did that happen? And it really is dependent a lot on whether he's getting swing and miss with his splitter.
Yeah, I think veteran lineups are more difficult because they think along with Gosman. They foul off a lot of his best pitches. And once you get to the postseason, you've got nothing but veteran lineups. Like the Yankee lineup that they're going to be facing in 6 of the last 12 games of the season features rookies. Can you imagine the Bronx Bombers with rookies from 5 to 9 in their batting order? That's not the Bronx Bombers. But in terms of reputation, if you're going into the Bronx, if you're going to Yankee Stadium, it's the Bronx Bombers, no matter who's in that lineup. But a guy like Gosman would be able to handle that because you've got so many young, inexperienced hitters. But once you get to the postseason, that's where you get your pitch count of Gosman up to 100 after 5 innings, and where you got to go to the bullpen. And so, like, I'm thinking of Barrios and maybe Bassett as more important in the postseason than Gosman.
All right, so to break the tie, because it's 4-4, and to see if Griff and I are a clean sweep of agreement, the relief pitching, the bullpen. So I've written down the 7 names that were active in the division and championship series in 2015. Roberto Osuna, Aaron Sanchez, Mark Lowe, LaTroy Hawkins, Liam Hendricks before he was Liam Hendricks.
Right.
Okay, this is not the Liam Hendricks that has been an amazing late inning leverage closer for Oakland, Chicago White Sox. Always been a wonderful guy, but wasn't necessarily a wonderful pitcher at that point. Aaron Loop and Ryan Tepera. And in 2023, with respect to Bowden Francis, who I've omitted here, and Griff, you can add him if you want, the 7 I have going to the playoffs are Jordan Romano, Jordan Hicks, Tim Meza, Eric Swanson, Jimmy Garcia, Chad Green, and Genesis Cabrera. So we've got to take personal feelings out of this because Roberto Osuna turned out to be a human being that was not worthy of the respect that we all showed him at the time, and focus on, accomplishments in the 2015 season and what that bullpen brought to the table versus the bullpen now and what it brings to the table. I will break the tie by giving a slight edge to the current pen. I would take the 2023 bullpen over the 2015 bullpen. And as much as I like Mark Lowe, I thought LaTroy Hawkins really started to tire as the season went on, and he would go on to retire after the season. As I said, Hendricks wasn't Hendricks yet. Tepera was still young in his career. Aaron Loop was a guy who was still young, but you could use him. You could get lefty-lefty matchups with him. But I think Jordan Romano has shown us some things. Jordan Hicks sometimes doesn't know where the ball's going when it leaves his hand, but throwing 102 is highly valuable. And I am comfortable with Romano and Hicks, but I'm also comfortable with Tim Meza throwing in leverage in the 8th inning and with Eric Swanson throwing in leverage in the totality of his season. I know that it's not always been smooth of late and he's coming off injury, but there are 4 guys from the 8th inning on that I feel good about. Jimmy Garcia has kind of found it a little more lately, so that helps. Chad Green is just getting back into his groove and has a lot of history and leverage in the playoffs for the New York Yankees. Genesis Cabrera is a bit of a wild card, but when I look at this 1 through 7, Griff, I'm quite comfortable with this group. So I'm going to give the edge to 2023 and give, out of the 9 categories, a 5-4 edge to the current team over the 2015 team.
Well, looking at the 2015 bullpen, I mean, the difference that you have to consider is that the rotation in 2015, and it was an era when starting pitchers would go 7 innings And you look at that list of starting pitchers, and they were going 7 innings most games, and even in the postseason going 7. It was a time. So like to cover the last 2 innings in a winning situation, that bullpen was fine. That bullpen was good. You could mix and match and go 2 or 3 days in a row if you're winning and still cover. But if you move that 2015 bullpen to 2023 and you had averages of just over 5 innings per start, I got to go with the 23 bullpen in terms of its depth, its ability. And John Schneider hasn't even tested the ability of these guys to get more than 3 outs. I think when you get to the postseason, and I asked him the other day, are you about to go and test guys and have them sit down and go back out for 3 more outs if they have a short pitch count in the 1 inning that they worked or in the partial inning that they worked? And he agreed that he was ready to do that. So in terms of what can be brought to the table in the postseason, the fact that in the postseason 4 and 5 inning starts are commonplace, I got to go with the 23 bullpen because you have guys who are proven, who you're not just guessing on. Like Aaron Sanchez was good, but he didn't have that track record of being in situations in relief, coming in and pitching multiple innings. But I would go 2023 because of the fact that the starts are shorter. You'd have more innings to cover than you did in 2015. 2015 was great, but it wouldn't be as good as the 2023 bullpen if you brought them to the future. Other than the fact that they're all 8 years older.
Yeah,
but
yeah, they all be mid-30s.
I'd go 23. So I'm agreeing with you again.
So clean sweep in agreement and a 5-4 edge in the 9 categories: first base, second base, shortstop, third base, catcher, DH, outfield as a whole, starting rotation, bullpen. The 9 categories. 5-4, both Griff and I prefer the 2023 team to the 2015 team. And that's what makes this so maddening, is because I think you and I will go to our graves believing, Griff, that the 2015 team should have won the World Series, could have won the World Series, had the talent, especially we're talking about after the July trades leading up to the deadline, Tulowitzki, Price, Ben Revere, etc. And here we are preferring by 1 category the 2023 team, and we feel like it's underperformed so badly. Maybe the best days are still ahead, but this group as a whole has the capability, and it would be nice to see it happen. It would be nice to see them after 5.5, almost 6 months of slogging along here and underperforming and disappointing relative to expectations. It would be nice to see them kick it into gear now.
Amen to that. And I think we're pretty close to putting a wrap on Exit Philosophy number 20. Have you got anything else to discuss before we shut it down?
If you're noticing, it might be the ring light I have over, but if you're noticing a few more strands of gray hair, Griff, my 49ers did that to me yesterday, but they won. So I'm happy. They're 2-0. Good on the Buffalo Bills to do what was expected and get back in the saddle and handle business against the Vegas Raiders. And yeah, I mean, I got a Niners game on Thursday night. The Giants are coming in for the home opener to kick off week 3.
I got to say that my expertise is taking a kicking. I thought the Chicago Bears would be the dark horse team moving forward. And
the Bears.
So far, no good. So
are you going to jump on the Buccaneers bandwagon just in time for them to start losing now that they're 2-0?
I'm still sticking with Justin Fields and see what he can do as time moves forward. They're finding their way. I really believe that teams that have a quarterback who's a young stallion who runs and who throws, when they try and make him a pocket passer, it never works out. And at some point, they go back to what he's good at. And I have a feeling that the Bears, when they let Justin Fields be what he is, and with the new receiving core that he's got and the offensive weapons that they've added, that they'll be challenging for the NFC North at some point. But we'll pay attention and we'll talk about it as the baseball season is in our rearview mirror at some point.
Look at Mike Ditka over here, just believing in the Bears.
Yeah.
We got to get you on SNL with the late great Chris Farley and George Wendt. Who was the other one in the Bears? Remember, they were all sitting around
Yes.
and yeah. Who would win a battle between Mike Ditka and a hurricane named Ditka?
That was great
Classic
stuff. That was when they were really funny back then.
Yeah, that's when they were really funny. That it's been a while. It's been a while. So we'd love you to comment if you're watching on YouTube, youtube.com/exit philosophy. If you're listening and looking for us, comment on who you prefer in the different categories or in general. The 2015 team, the 2023 team thought it would be a fun game to play today. As you know, we're available wherever you get your podcasts. And a reminder, griffsthepitch.com. Griffsthepitch.com is where you can get all of Rich's work. Multiple weekly Blue Jays and MLB columns. Griff is looking off into the distance. Is he going to say this word for word verbatim like he always does? So multiple weekly Blue Jays and MLB columns, a weekly MLB Power Rankings column. You get exclusive conversations that Griff has, one-on-ones with some of the game's current and former greats, focusing on current, former Blue Jays, and a lot of the great Montreal Expos from back in the day. And the Exit Philosophy podcast is also linked to griffsthepitch.com.
I appreciate that, Scotty. And thanks, everyone, for tuning in to episode 20. And we'll be back in a week or maybe less.
Talk to you then.